Hey, welcome, Player Profiler News Prime Time. Feeling like Chris Berman right now. There is no Mike Greinberg tonight. His son has a hockey tournament, so best wishes to him. His son is in the championship, so a lot of us are going for the ship in our leagues, and his son is going out there for a hockey ship. That's the main theme. But look, Mike is Canadian. So we do have some quality maple syrup. If we ever need to, we'll just slug some back. And hope you're all doing well. We have league winners and league Lahu Zahers. Okay, you have people who have really helped you launch through. And then, of course, guys who have laid duds in week 17. Week 17, you feel it both ways, just as tough or just as good. When a player performs for you, it's like the points double count in your memory towards ADP next year. Then, of course, when a player really drags on you, we can have this vividness bias where we're really not happy at all with what happened, and it kind of carries and has a little bit of a dulling effect into the 2025 season. But we have some players to talk about, some results, and of course, we're going to preview tonight's game. So without further ado, we will get into our top stories. All right, let's talk about our top performers. All right, quarterbacks, running backs. We have Joe Burrow. All right, what a week for him. Goes for 36.98 fantasy points, 39 of 49 completions, 412 passing yards, and 3 touchdown passes, all to T. Higgins. Joe Burrow had 4 carries for 25 yards and rushed in a touchdown late. That was a big swing in leagues where people had Chase Brown. Brown, in hesitating to not score, ended up hurting himself, although it sounds like Chase Brown will be okay into next week. Joe Burrow is our QB6 in our dynasty rankings on Player Profiler. Burrow this year, QB3 in fantasy. There's a great pocket of ADP where you could get Joe Burrow 8th, 9th round, and he was an excellent value in underdog drafts. Of course, single QB leagues, big value there. And of course, in Superflex leagues, how can you not love every type of format? Joe Burrow. Burrow is first in passing yards, second in money throws, fifth in adjusted yards per attempt at 7.8, third in fantasy points per game with 22.1. And then, so Joe Burrow right now, QB1 on the week, 36.98 points in 4-point passing scoring. So if you have 6 points, it's even better. And then next up, we're talking studs and duds. How can we not love Baker Mayfield? Burrow and Baker were on a lot of playoff advancing teams in both best ball, of course, in redraft and in dynasty leagues all across the board. If you had Baker and Joe Burrow, you've done very well in fantasy football this year. If not, you've run on some very bad luck, or you need to reevaluate a couple things. Baker with 34.56 fantasy points. Mayfield was 27 of 32 for completions, 359 passing yards, 5 touchdown passes, 2 to Mike Evans. If you were acquiring Mike Evans for your win now teams in Dynasty, hopefully there was no trade deadline for you. You are thriving. 2 touchdowns to the up-and-coming Jalen McMillan, and 1 touchdown pass to Payne Durham. So Baker is a very safe asset in Dynasty. The offense and the team now belongs to Baker Mayfield. So really think about this. In the post-Tom Brady Bucs era, this is mightily impressive. How can you not love any and all weapons tied to Baker Mayfield heading into 2025? So you have value insulation for Baker as a quarterback. And then you have value insulation for players who are tied to Baker Mayfield. Hint, Bucky Irving. And we'll get to Bucky Irving a little bit later. I want to go into an honorable mention, Drew Lock, with 4 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Lock helped Malik Neighbors managers have a very happy week 17. Look, Drew Lock is going to be a backup quarterback for the rest of his career. He'll have spot duty opportunities, but that was a big performance for Drew Lock to stay in the league. Make no mistake, Drew Lock will have a clipboard that he holds next year and will have opportunity to play at some point in 2025. The games being now 17 games a season, 18 games a season, you're at much more better odds of the backup quarterbacks on teams playing a game or two each season. For a dud this week, quarterback studs and duds. Matthew Stafford, only 9.16 fantasy points for Stafford, 189 yards passing against the Cardinals, no touchdown passes. The Rams, as a team, collective, scored 13 points. This game was supposed to be a shootout. There was a big buildup in the offseason for the Week 17 Cardinals-Rams matchup. But this one left more to be desired. It's kind of funny to think the Colts and the Giants for best ball drafts really wasn't a highly drafted matchup. And this Rams-Cardinals matchup very much was a high amount of drafters strategizing for every piece that they could get, only for it to be a 13-9 score. So it's a dud for Matthew Stafford, but you got to think Matthew Stafford has really thrived in supporting multiple top 10 wide receiver options throughout the season, be it Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp on given weeks. And then, of course, there was a week where Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson were supported as two top 10 wide receivers. I believe that was the game where Puka Nacua got kicked out against the Seattle Seahawks. Remember that? That was really bizarre. Let's pivot over to our running backs. Top performances for our running backs. Jonathan Taylor, if you advance after his drop fumble prior to scoring a touchdown in Denver, you've been winning your matchups the last 2 weeks. JT is raising his dynasty value at the perfect time. JT rushes for 125 yards, banged in 2 touchdowns, and had the bellest of cow usage with 32 carries. Is this the 90s? This was a remarkable shootout in a very overlooked game, as I was talking about. The Colts players paid off big in Week 17. Fortunately, I'm in a championship. I lost Jalen Hurts. I was able to stream Joe Flacco, and I picked up Alec Pierce. I had to shoot for everything. I lost Chuba Hubbard in that matchup as well. So I benefited this week. I have a shot to win versus the no shot that I had having lost Jalen Hurts and Chuba Hubbard. It's been a bloodbath in Week 17, but I digress. I know everybody else has some pain there out there, stories they can tell. Now let's go to Bucky Irving, running back studs and duds. Mike and I were very high on Bucky Irving just a couple weeks ago on our show, The Dynasty Pulse. We both, along with Schultze, took a stand in the Bucky Irving-Rachaad White debate in favor of Bucky Irving. Shout out to our co-hosts Biggs and Chev. You can find them Friday on Player Profiler News. It was a really spirited, good debate. A lot of good talk about leverage and dynasty windows. So it's very much, even though the 5 of us were debating about Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, there's a lot of evergreen dynasty concepts that are in that episode. So Bucky Irving comes away with 23 points. Amazingly enough, no touchdown equity. I spoke to the 5 touchdowns for the Buccaneers, 2 to Mike Evans, 2 to Jalen McMillan, and 1 to Payne Durham. Very painful for Bucky Irving managers, but it was very good. Bucky Irving is the RB4 on the week. Irving had 20 carries, 113 yards rushing, and really shined in the passing game. He was 4 of 7 receiving for 77 yards. This was very close to an even bigger blow-up game had Bucky Irving gotten to that touchdown equity. So we're possibly looking at a 30-point game for Bucky Irving. So you love to see it. And I'll talk a little bit more in the Bullish Bearish segment about Bucky Irving, what I'm excited about for him going forward for his dynasty market and value, which is funny because I'm going to speak to, we're doing studs and duds here at each position, Breece Hall. All right, little teaser. The Bills are such a good matchup for opposing running backs, which is something to watch in the playoffs. Be mindful if you want to stack tournaments and maybe strategize in some of your underdog best ball. Think of the running backs who could be facing the Buffalo Bills. If you're making bets, I would want to attack the Buffalo Bills defense, whoever the running backs are in the first, second, third, whatever rounds there are players facing the Buffalo Bills. I want those running backs. But today or yesterday, Brees got just 6.3 fantasy points, 10 carries, 45 yards, only one reception for 8 yards, no touchdowns. Just puzzling usage in a blowout game. It may sound crazy, but I have Bucky Irving and Brees Hall a lot closer in Dynasty. Is it any fault of Brees Hall? I think it's just been a terrible, terrible situation for the Jets in entirety. So I really can't blame Brees Hall. And the game did get out of hand for the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. It was just a bloodbath there. It was a self-defense, getaway, runaway, right away situation for the New York Jets. It was really tough for them in entirety, just trying to get through that game. And maybe next year. And also, this might cause a potential dip for us with Brees Hall. Think on underdog, can Brees Hall be a second round draft pick next year? I don't think he'll fall to the third. It's funny. You hope for egregious discounts, but the underdog market is so sharp. I think you're only going to end up getting into the second round dip for Brees Hall, and you're going to have to pay the piper. It's so funny how you still have to pay up for some players. Just look at Marvin Harrison Jr., who did not turn out. Marvin Harrison Jr., there was no getting any kind of money zone wide receiver dip on Marvin Harrison Jr. You had to pay the piper at the 1-2 turn. You paid at the ceiling price, and you got basement value back from that. Where in years prior, somebody like Jamar Chase, you could get in the 7th round, his rookie season, and that's been gone. Like, players gradually, stud players have just been moved all the way up on ADP. So it's kind of funny in a post-hype way for Brees Hall. You're not going to get much more discount than a second round pick on underdog. So stock is down for Brees Hall, but hopefully it can be a better situation for Brees Hall and all Jets. Normally, Mike and I, we talk about this segment, some injuries and what have you. We're not going to go over the injuries. We don't have Mike here tonight, but also we don't have, heading into week 18, many championships left. Next week, it's all incentives. So we don't have the injury report for you tonight. We will go more into some of our performers, our bearish, bullish, and of course, the 49ers and the Lions. But the Podfather has something he wants to tell us regarding injuries.
Hey, you're in your fantasy draft and someone says, hey, that guy's injury prone. I don't want him. And you're like, I don't know. I don't think you can predict injuries. Well, guess what? Now you can. Injury proneness is real. At Player Profiler, we have the data on these players, and it's all in the Injury Finder app. Their injury track record back through time, exactly where they were injured, how severe it is. We look at the BMI data, and we crunch it all together, and we give you probabilities that a player will miss multiple games this NFL season, as well as the complete database of NFL injuries and the ability to compare two players and look at their injury track record. The Injury Finder is powerful, and it's only $5. If it's worth it to have that peace of mind when you're drafting, go get it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Podfather. Also, use code Santa for the all-in Player Profiler package. You're talking about the DFS Dominator, the Dynasty rankings, the Injury Finder. It's all encompassing in there. And it's kind of like you get a little taste, and then you want it every single year. It's good. It renews in February. I'm always happy to renew for the value that you get. You get a lot of data analysis that's available to you. And of course, Player Profiler already has so many free tools and loads of information for you. So if you're not on Player Profiler, you're not tapped in, get more tapped in, make that your New Year's resolution. Think of Parks and Rec, where he's like, hey, treat yourself to some all-in package from Player Profiler. Now let's get into the top performers for receiver and tight end this week. We have T. Higgins. How can we not talk about him? It's funny enough, we spoke to Joe Burrow. Usually there are tandems at the top here when we talk about top performers. T. Higgins, the wide receiver 1 overall on the week, 40.1 points, 11 of 12 receiving, 131 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It was very cool to see on an island game T. Higgins shine, especially for him trying to secure the bag this offseason, which T. Higgins will do. I would personally love to see T. Higgins with the Chargers or the Patriots. Justin Herbert, Drake May would be delightful. I don't think it would hurt one bit between Lab McConkey and T. Higgins. Just look at how much Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have thrived. I could see it just being a perfect tandem, Lab McConkey and T. Higgins. Remember, receivers, while they might play wide receiver, they don't all necessarily play the same role or the same position in an offense. So they can definitely complement each other. Shout out to Ray GQ over at DD Fantasy Football. He's always talking about the differentiation in player roles in receiver rooms. So I wouldn't see any clashing there. And then, of course, Drake May. Why not get Drake May, T. Higgins? Drake May is going to end up being, to me, either next year or year 3, a league-winning superflex quarterback. And he's going to enter into that territory where in 1 QB leagues, Drake May makes a difference. Already has the rushing output, but you just need to put some talent around Drake May because he has a wonderful arm as well. On the Dynasty Pulse, though, back to Higgins. He was my stock up player, which aired prior to the game. So to me, it feels great that I had that call. The only bearish angle for T. Higgins is him missing time. How do you predict injury? We have the injury finder here that we have at Player Profiler. But I tend to be somebody who, if there's an injury in the past, I leave it in the past. And if a player is healthy, I presume they're healthy, especially when they're younger in their career. So stock is all the way up on T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is the wide receiver 1 on the week. Hopefully he won you your league this week. Now to the wide receiver 2 this week, Malik Neighbors has a blow-up game. BTJ has caught a ton of steam and consideration as the wide receiver 1 in this 2024 class. Neighbors has out-targeted BTJ significantly on the season. Ironically, though, Malik Neighbors has had worse QB play than BTJ, and that is really saying something. Although I do want to give some credit to how Mac Jones has played recently. Malik on Sunday went 7 of 8, 171 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. He almost had a third touchdown where he caught the ball just in front of the 1 and went out of bounds. It was a perfect storm of a shootout. The angle heading into 2025 is the Giants improving at quarterback. But the Giants winning does not help their draft stock at quarterback. So we will see. It might have to be some grocery shopping at the quarterback position versus Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, who are the 2 early candidates in the first round of the NFL draft in 2025. I had to think about that for a second. I almost said 2024. Malik Neighbors and BTJ will be neck and neck at ADP. I've already seen on X different people ranking underdogs first round, and I keep seeing Malik Neighbors and BTJ back to back. That aligns with what I've seen, and I think you will see that printed when Underdog posts their ADP. I personally already plan on splitting them 50-50 as much as I can, just knowing you'll want both in best ball drafting across dynasty leagues. If I can splice off trades to split my stock between the two in redraft, if I'm at that juxtaposition, I want even amounts of Malik Neighbors and BTJ. It's kind of like in Casino where Robert De Niro's like, I want an equal amount of blueberries in every muffin. I just want an equal amount of Malik Neighbors and BTJ next year. To me, it's a good champagne problem to have. I had a lot of Malik Neighbors this year. I had a lot of BTJ, but we have to consider it was Malik in the third round BTJ in the 7th. That's not going to be happening. Their ADPs are going to be married now. So you'll have to make a choice. You won't be able to get both on the same team unless they happen to be at the 1-2 turn, which if that happens, I'll be like Pac-Man gobbling that right up. So for receivers, for a dud, this one is tricky. It was a little more difficult to find this week, but no Jalen Hurts impacts this. A.J. Brown, though, goes 3 of 5, 36 yards and a touchdown. The offense just went through Devonta Smith, and as the game got out of hand, Saquon Barkley was just getting fed. The Eagles want to get Saquon that rushing record. A.J. Brown did get that touchdown, which oddly enough felt like it was his turn in the rotation. If you've ever worked at a restaurant, you know as a server, the assigned tables rotate as the customers come in. It just felt like A.J. Brown got his touchdown in perfect rotation. But just 12.6 fantasy points on a day where you had hoped to at least have 20 points in PPR leagues from A.J. Brown. Now his teammate, Devonta Smith, as I'm looking at the results at the receivers, Devonta Smith, 6 of 7 receiving, 120 yards, and the touchdown equity was there even more for Devonta Smith. 2 touchdowns, 30 points for Devonta Smith. Funny enough, the wide receiver 2 on the week, and I was noticing this last night. I was doing a stream for the Player Profiler TikTok. I had a little post-game stream there. And Malik Neighbors, the following receivers all had 2 touchdowns. Malik Neighbors, wide receiver 2, and this is running down in order. Marvin Mims had 2 touchdowns, wide receiver 3. Devonta Smith, Mike Evans, Lab McConkey, and Adam Thielen. So you had 6 receivers have 2 touchdowns from 2 to 7. And then, of course, T. Higgins had 3. So your top 7 receivers on the week, heading into tonight, all had 2 touchdowns or more. Now, for tight ends, studs and duds, let's talk about Trey McBride with a 30-burger, 12 of 16 receiving, 123 yards, and finally got a touchdown reception. All year I've been betting on him to get his touchdown. I've been making 2 touchdown bets, and unfortunately, McBride only got the 1 touchdown, but thank God he finally got there. Needed him this week in a finals matchup. McBride, speaking to that second touchdown, almost had it at the end of the game. McBride took accountability on the pass. It bounced off his helmet. It was a really high leverage look at the goal line that he could not haul in. With a second touchdown left on the field, McBride is still the tight end 1 on the week. And then for the tight end 3, I want to shout out to Travis Kelce, 22.4 points, 8 of 11 receiving, 84 yards and a touchdown on Christmas Day. Travis Kelce passed Tony Gonzalez for the all-time Chiefs touchdowns record. Kelce is the tight end 5 on the season and will safely be ranked as the tight end 5 in 2025 should he keep playing. So he'll be top 5, but we just aren't going to get so many ceiling games that break a slate as we have with Bowers and McBride having taken the reins over. For a dud, Dalton Kincaid, 4.4 fantasy points, 2 of 2 receiving for 24 yards. Kincaid is the tight end 23 on the season. His value is really tied to Josh Allen, a mid-single-digit round pick on underdog. Dalton Kincaid has been a huge disappointment. Our very own Dan Williamson talks about tight ends aging like fine wine. It can take 4 or 5 years sometimes for them to hit. So Kincaid really fits that narrative, and your hope is stored in he and Josh Allen clicking the next few seasons. Now, normally here, we would have a story from Mike. He'd have his second topic. So I'm just going to hold up some maple syrup and just shout out to Canada, just a great country where Mike is from. We miss you, Mike. We hope you're doing well. we will see him next week. And then I just want to let you all know, if you're enjoying the show, don't miss out on more exclusive content. Subscribe to our Player Profiler YouTube channel at Player Profiler News. Follow us on X at Profiler_NFL. Visit playerprofiler.com/news and get all the latest breaking news and its impact on fantasy football. So you want to stay ahead of the game and tune in. Come see us. We're always pushing out very good content. Next up, we have Bearish and Bullish.
0-1. M.O. Come on.
All right. So normally, Mike and I, we trade Bullish and Bearish. I had Bearish this week. Mike usually has Bullish. So I have, for my Bullish, it's Bucky Irving. I really like Bucky Irving. I spoke to him earlier about his finish this week. Bucky Irving finishes as the RB4. We talked about Bucky's performance this week, pulling up some of his most recent performances from weeks 10, 12, and 13. Bucky Irving was the RB7, 3, and 1 overall. The last 3 weeks, there had been a dip there. And then, of course, you had the Rachaad White fumble in a pivotal moment against the Dallas Cowboys. And that really seemed to have shifted things. If you follow the Coach Speak Index, there was a lot of talk from the coaches about how much they want to get Bucky Irving the ball. And you saw the increased usage for Bucky Irving. If we're looking over on our dynasty rankings on Player Profiler, I'm going to venture to guess that this is going to change. But right now at the top names at running back, really can't argue with this, right? Versus Bucky Irving. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Breece Hall, I'll get to. Saquon Barkley may be the 101 or 102 next year. Jonathan Taylor's stock has gone up. Ken Walker is 7th right now. I think that's going to tank. That's going to go down. Kyren Williams, I think he'll go down a little bit, but not too far, right? Josh Jacobs has ascended very well, age 26 right now. Then you have Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving at 12. I think you could make an argument that Bucky Irving and Breece Hall are right about even, especially in Dynasty, when you take into account Bucky Irving's age 22, and then even compare Bucky Irving to Kyren Williams, who we had mentioned. I saw Debro put out a good tweet where he talked about Kyren Williams, Bucky Irving. It's the sequel with Bucky Irving to Kyren Williams. The one argument I would make is that Bucky Irving is a much more efficient running back, and I like more of the dual usage for Bucky Irving in the passing game. And the similarities, though, are there between Kyren and Bucky. They both had poor combine performances, although a lot of people were in on them skill-wise prior to the poor combine. So there are certain players that come along where we really have to just believe in their skill set, what we see on the field. And sometimes you can't go fully on the combine stats, especially if a guy can get 20 miles per hour on the GPS in game. Standing for a 40, getting in position and then bolting is really the optimal position to be in, that you're trying to maneuver something where it's really not game-like. You're never going to run like you are in a track meet in the NFL. You're not going to get down there in the stance. So I think we have to be mindful of that. But Bucky Irving is my bullish player, and I am going to be bullish enough to put him up with Breece Hall in Dynasty. Will the hype get out of control? Sure, absolutely. Bucky Irving, though, again, how can we not love being married to the Baker Mayfield Tampa Bay offense in just a productive, good weather environment? You're going to get the games short of, London appearances. In division, you've got the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints, so there's some indoor games. You play in Florida for most of the year. Those are good games, shy of maybe some hurricane games in the beginning of the year. And then the Carolina Panthers, they play in tremendous weather. I'm in North Carolina right now in Raleigh, and it's like 60 degrees. I really don't like it. It's pretty rough. I want some winter. I'm from up north. I'm up from New York, and yeah, I'll take some cooler weather this time of year. But don't get me wrong, I really do love the warm weather of the South. So my bullish player is Bucky Irving. And let's go to bearish. On my bearish side, CJ Stroud. Stroud is a QB 18 on the season. He was drafted as a top 5 quarterback in the mid single digit rounds. Only one QB1 performance in the last 10 games for CJ Stroud. Stroud lost his weapons, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, but his drop off is noticeable in, for me, his inability to elevate players that are around him. So the feeling for Stroud was that he was going to take over, be part of that upper echelon, top 5 in Dynasty, right? This is just another instance of why we keep coming back to this game we love. The fantasy football community as a whole did not forecast this big of a drop off in year 2. Now, I didn't really like the Stroud ADP versus a clump of Burrow, Kyler, Dak, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. There was a clump of quarterbacks where I thought, if there's just a little bit of regression for Stroud and then some more ascension in the passing efficiency for, say, somebody like Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, then those ADPs should be much closer. So what is going to happen is the ADP is going to scale back for CJ Stroud. And to me, CJ Stroud will then be properly valued. And if the fantasy community doesn't want CJ Stroud, that's where I'm going to be in buying, whether I'm clicking drafts in best ball or I'm trying to buy in Dynasty for the right price. It has truly been a sophomore slump for CJ Stroud. But again, I will happily look to see if he's 4 rounds cheaper this offseason. Click, 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 clickety click. Keep trade cut. I was looking yesterday, has these following trades as even. CJ Stroud for Justin Herbert. Give me Justin Herbert. Stroud for Jordan Love. To me, that's very even. I'm very neutral. Neither one moves the needle for me. CJ Stroud for Saquon Barkley. In a win now team, give me Barkley. I would want Stroud in a rebuild. Of course, I would want Stroud plus. Can I get Stroud plus a second? Can I squeeze that manager if I've got Saquon Barkley and they're trying to win, right? Stroud or BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., give me BTJ. Brian Thomas Jr. is a hammer wide receiver. How do you not love BTJ? Look, I know we fall overly in love with quarterbacks in Dynasty Superflex against skill position players. But BTJ is somebody who can hammer 30 and 40-point outputs, and he's just got a bright future ahead of him. Give me BTJ there. Stroud or Devon Achane. I'd want a little plus on that if I'm giving up Devon Achane. All of these scenarios collectively favor that I've just ran through on KTC, to me, favors the other player. So that is why I am bearish on CJ Stroud. So we have a game tonight. We got the Lions. We've got the 49ers. We need to get into it. We're going to go into our Coach's Corner. All right. So we have the Detroit Lions tonight. A lot of talk about what is the motivation level for the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell is very firm on we are going to play, and we're going to play to win. This is a rematch, of course, last year of that NFC Championship game where the Lions blew that big lead. So I would think that Dan Campbell would just want it. And even though mathematically next week's matchup against the Vikings is all that matters, it doesn't strike me that the feelings versus the numbers. Dan Campbell is just going to be very much a feelings type of player and coach in his mentality in lining up and wanting to bite off kneecaps. So I expect the Lions to keep their players out there and play to win. Because it's funny, if it were week 18, you could rest your players. But there's something odd about still being in season resting one week and then being full go the very next. Whereas if you finish the season, then you go into the playoffs, you're psyching yourself back up into this higher mode where the rest is good. But there's just something weird about how I don't think in season the routine, that's such a good thing to turn it off and then turn it back on. And I think that's where Dan Campbell leads and thinks. So Jared Goff, let's talk about him. QB7 on the season. Goff is 5th in MVP odds, plus 15,000. So Goff is not going to win, but he's at least in the conversation. You lay a set of names. When they invite Heisman candidates for the finalists, they invite people. Some people, even when they get on that plane, they're not going to get voted, but to be in the room, to be in the conversation is an absolute honor. Jared Goff, shout out to him. Jared Goff in our EPX metric, explosive rating, is 4th with a score of 117.4. So a lot of 20-point passing plays for Jared Goff. And of course, you've got Amon-Ra, Gibbs, and then Jameson Williams, who are some electric players that help offer on the other end those explosive plays. Jared Goff is number 2 in passing yards with 4,095. 2nd in yards per attempt at 8.7. 7th in best ball points added at 65. 7th in fantasy points per dropback. Number 2, Jared Goff in true passer rating. This has been a beautiful reversed Beverly Hills Cop where Goff got shipped to Detroit from glamorous LA. All right, remember, Eddie Murphy went from Detroit to LA. The Rams won their part of the trade, but you can make a great argument the Lions did as well. They've turned into a perennial contender. Now let's go over to Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he RB2 on the season? You can make an argument that he can be the 101 in the event that there's no David Montgomery in the picture. But that's not the case. So you'll be able to get a handful of picks discount next year on Gibbs, so long as David Montgomery is still in the picture. And even then, it may be hard for people to not bid up on Gibbs in underdog drafts, in redraft leagues, in that upper half of the first round. David Montgomery, though, is reported to be good for next season regarding his injury, that while David Montgomery may be out for the duration here, 2025 looks A-okay. Jahmyr Gibbs is 3rd in our explosive rating, so I spoke to Jared Goff on the other side. Gibbs is there, number 3 with a score of 124.2. Gibbs 4th in red zone touches with 55. 7th in rushing yards with just over 1,100. So it's rushing and receiving. Gibbs offers it legitimately both ways. Gibbs is 4th in running back receiving yards with 440. Think of how much higher that would be if there was unadulterated share in that backfield with all those earlier games, David Montgomery getting opportunity share, and Gibbs is 2nd in total touchdowns. So with the unadulterated opportunity tonight, you are in position to win your matchup this week. If you need a 40 burger in PPR, you have a shot. Don't write it in pen, put it down in pencil, but you've got just as good a shot as anybody. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the wide receiver 3. Look at all these higher ranked players, good teams, good players in fantasy. We talk about it all the time. Draft good teams, good players, and good players on good teams to make your fantasy football teams very good. And it's funny enough how that works. If you've drafted Lions, you have thrived. In our weekly recaps, when we do our studs and duds, we're always having Lions fill up these spots. So we just so happen to be talking about a preview for the Lions tonight, whereas had the Lions played yesterday, we're probably talking about them filling out the top spots. Amon-Ra is 2nd in red zone targets with 26. 3rd in catchable target rate at 82.4%. 3rd in total touchdowns. Remember, 2 years ago, Amon-Ra got tackled numerous times at the 1-yard line. It was almost comical. Jamal Williams had 17 rushing touchdowns. Remember that? Amon-Ra is getting that combo of slot usage, 7th in slot snaps, with the combination of red zone targets, So he is, Amon-Ra, a PPR magnet while getting the touchdown equity. So let's go to a more volatile wideout, Jameson Williams. He can turn a matchup upside down. The problem is that volatility makes it so that JMO can turn your lineup upside down. JMO is 8th in explosive rating with a score of 122.3. So the Lions are killing this metric. JMO was the wide receiver 4 last week against the Bears. 2 red zone targets, 7 targets altogether, 5 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. 26 fantasy points. The problem is, last 4 games, JMO has finished between wide receiver 28 and wide receiver 43. Jameson Williams this year, 3 top 12 games. But ready? Week 1, Week 11, and Week 16. So the ultimate takeaway, and people hate hearing this, but it is the truth. Jameson Williams is better in best ball. How are you going to decide? But it has been a nice thing to see Jameson Williams have more of a fuller season from him having issues with suspensions and injuries. JMO did still have that 2-game suspension, but it just feels overall that Jameson Williams is on a better career path and track. Now let's talk about Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick has 7 games of 70% snap share or more. Only 1 target last week for Tim Patrick. Patrick in the 5 previous weeks had a combination of 7 red zone targets. So Goff does have an eye for Tim Patrick. So if we see some touchdown variance that isn't Amon-Ra, isn't Gibbs, it's more of a, hey, who's that random player? Tim Patrick is that candidate for the Lions. Now finishing strong, Sam Laporta. Laporta is the tight end 10. Make no mistake, Laporta versus ADP, big disappointment. Laporta is 3rd in explosive rating with a score of 113.4. So there we go again. More explosiveness for the Lions. Laporta has a tight end 1 or better finish, though, in 5 of the last 6 games. Right around that JMO suspension is where Laporta started to come alive and the offensive philosophy shifted some. So Sam Laporta, ironically, tonight is a lot like George Kittle. Until there are injuries to star players, it is tough to make Laporta the focus on the offense. And that speaks to what a luxury the Lions have now and what a luxury the 49ers have had the last few seasons. So Sam Laporta's strong finish, though, it's making his stock rise back up in Dynasty. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride have a lock on the 1-2 spots with George Kittle in there as well. Laporta is 4th in our player profiler Dynasty rankings. So keep a sharp eye on Sam Laporta's ADP when Underdog releases their rankings, and check in on your 1.5 tight end premium Dynasty leagues for Laporta's price. So CJ Stroud, Sam Laporta, 2 players you had to pay ceiling prices for. We talk about Dynasty discipline, when you sell, when you buy. Can you have the best ball discipline on Underdog in 2025 to buy the dip on Sam Laporta, buy the dip on CJ Stroud? Now, let's go, Bradley. Let's go, Jer. How we doing? I'm trying to keep up with everything going on here, pressing a lot of buttons. This is a lot of fun. Let's see something else. I'm up 26 with St. Brown to play. My opponent has Gibbs and JMO. Very tough scene, 1 for 1. Let's say Gibbs and St. Brown cancel each other out. You're talking about, can JMO get you the 26 points? That's going to be rough, but crazier things have happened. Look at Devon Achane. I know Achane wasn't supposed to perform so great without Tua Tagovailoa, but for no reason at all, Mike McDaniel just kind of quiet quit on Achane fantasy managers and just had Achane on the sideline for most of the second half in yesterday's game. So crazier things can happen. We will see. That's going to be tough, Steve. The next one, Goff over or under 23.2 and 4-point passing touchdown. Need under for the ship. I think you can get that under just for the fact that I see this game being more of a drawn out, and I'll speak to it in a moment, more of a run heavy game where it's a 50 and a half point over under. I think we can end up with a little more clock milking to where there'll be more handoffs, less passing touchdowns for Jared Goff. I think you can get just under for Jared Goff. Let's go to another comment, and then I'll get into the 49ers side, and of course, we'll be on our way. Losing by 20 points in the standard league, Richard. You have Gibbs, Laporta, and Bates left. Garendo on bench. Play Gibbs or Garendo, not sure how. Oh, yeah, you go Gibbs. You ride or die. You would crush yourself if Gibbs. Yeah, this is no doubter. You go Gibbs. You go down with the ship if you have to, but I don't think you're going to have to. We spoke to earlier, Dan Campbell is just bona fide, like, kneecap biter. He's not going to just take it in. Oh, well, we should just kind of go easy this week and then go hard next week. I think Dan Campbell thinks if the Lions don't go hard, then it'll soften them up for the next week. That's just some coach psychology that I think is out there. Now let's see. Let's do the chef's table. Here, this one's for Mike. All right. I can't necessarily talk in a Canadian accent, but there is some maple syrup. All right. This is some good Vermont maple syrup. I know they got it all up there in Canada. So shout out to Mike again. We will rock this chef selection, chef's table. Right. Let's see. Let me go down to my notes. Brock Purdy. Let's talk about the 49ers. Is he QB12? We'll see how big of a contract Purdy gets in the offseason. The 49ers, 6-9. It's a lost season. Can you imagine saying that earlier in the year? Brock Purdy is 5th in explosive rating with a score of 115.6. Brock is 6th in red zone attempts, 3rd in yards per attempt, 12th in fantasy points per drop back at 0.55, 11th in best ball points added at 34.7. Very cool metric there. So Brock Purdy, maybe a little better in best ball. No Brandon Ayuk. The hope has been that Debo would dominate. Debo is the wide receiver 41 and has lost a lot of juice. Debo is 42nd in fantasy points per game with 10.3. His odds, Debo, of a touchdown tonight on FanDuel are at plus 175. They may have altered just a little bit from when I marked that down. Juwan Jennings, though, right behind Debo at plus 180. Jennings is a boom or bust player. Jennings has 4 games this year as a wide receiver 15 or better. The last 2 weeks, though, Jennings has been wide receiver 67 and 53, so it's been all over the map. Expect more of this offense to go through the run game with Isaac Garendo and feature George Kittle if the 49ers will compete tonight. Kittle is the tight end 2 on the season. Bowers, McBride, they're seen as the 1 and 2 in Dynasty and in weekly rankings, but Kittle has quietly feasted. Kittle is number 1 in EPX. His explosive rating is at a score of 153.4. Kittle can take over a game at any moment. For Isaac Garendo, the rushing line is set at 60.5, and his total rushing and receiving prop is set at 79.5. The 49ers O-line is banged up, but so are the Detroit Lions, so we'll see if Kyle Shanahan's own run scheme can be effective with Garendo having dealt with limited practices all week. It's been the foot and the hamstring for Garendo. So Patrick Taylor may mix in. This game has an over-under I spoke to 50.5. The expectation is that there will be a shootout. I expect more clock to bleed tonight on both sides of the ball, slowing the game down. I lean towards the under if I had to choose. Hopefully you go out there and you win. You get what you need tonight from your players, or if you have a lead, you hold off. This is a tough game to sweat. I'm facing Garendo in 2 finals, Kittle in 1, and Gibbs in another. I'm feeling real rough about the Gibbs one. It's going to be tough, but crazier things have happened, and you do things to get here. If you're in the ship, hat tip to you. And of course, if you win, bigger hat tip, excellent accomplishment. 1 out of 12, 1 out of 10 is nothing to just scoff at. Just tremendous. So we will see you next week. Of course, the season never ends. We just go into the non-football playing season. This is a year-round affair. So we will see you next week.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.